Hey Mitch, how you doing today?
Good. How about you?
I'm doing pretty well. So today we're going to have a conversation. Stephen and I have been doing some conversations we call ServiceNow conversations. But I wouldn't say one of our customers, but one of the questions customers or prospects ask us or, want to know our opinion on is how are we thinking about AI? And in the ServiceNow world, it's a lot of times, what are we thinking about in terms of generative AI? Because that's a term that ServiceNow uses everywhere right now. They're very focused on it. So I thought it'd be good. We are not AI experts by any means, but I think we have an opinion and kind of a perspective that customers would like to hear. So I'm going to take us through a conversation. You ready for that?
Let's do it.
Okay. So let's start off with kind of the big picture. I think one of the things that people always have an opinion about or, just want to have an understanding of is where does AI fall in the terms of technology changes? So you see a lot of polls or conversations over the last year and a half, 2 years about major shift changes in technology. So like the invention of the iPhone or the internet or the web or email, like all these different things that have happened. Where does generative AI fall in that world? We've had a few conversations, but generally kind of how do you think it fits into how we think about technology changes?
Yeah, I think the generative part is very key because to me, there's been some level of AI for a while, but generative AI is something clearly new, clearly different, clearly going to be very helpful. And one thing I always find myself fighting with when you go through these different hype cycles is this going to survive or is this truly a hype cycle? I do think, and I mean, this might be the most layup take ever, but I do believe this is sticking around for a long time and is only going to get better. I don't think this is, trying to apply a technology to problems that don't exist. I do think generative AI is helping people work a lot more efficiently. And I think we're going to see it continue to grow. So I do think it's pretty exciting, as far as looking at the history of technological changes that have really changed the world. I don't know how right now to say where that'll fit in. I'd be shocked if it wasn't similar to, the iPhone moment. But also when the iPhone moment happened, I don't think everyone knew how widespread that change would be. So it will be really interesting and exciting 10 years from now to look back and say, was this the moment that everything started to change? I think there's a good likelihood it is.
Yeah, I do think about this quite often, just like the grand scheme of like where things fit in. AI has been around forever, right? So it's not new. It's not within the past 10 years, but this generative AI kind of perspective. And when you look at the different changes over time in technology, usually there's a use case or a clear business problem or a clear application of the technology. So, when I joined VividCharts, crypto was going through its big, boom. One of several big booms over the last 15 years. And, it's struggled to find, other than maybe like Bitcoin to store value, it's killer app, you may say. iPhone, I think, so the point is, crypto's still around, but it's still trying to find its footing in where it fits in technology. The iPhone is everywhere because the App Store, so the marrying of applications in the App Store, solving business problems for people, allowed the iPhone to go from just another smartphone like BlackBerries or the other Nokias and other things that were out there to one that truly was very different that everyone had to have for that technology. I think in the way I look at this is that we had machine learning, we had different AI types of technologies being tested prior to the last couple of years, but really ChatGPT was the killer application in my mind that inspired a lot of interest. And technologists would probably go back to 2017 and, Google's introduction of the transformers, so it allowed all that. That's over my head. The technology around that's over my head. But I do think the killer app was ChatGPT, because, most of my friends that aren't in technology, if you talk about AI, they're going to say, oh yeah, I use ChatGPT, or now I use Gemini, or, something like that. Okay, so we both think that, of course, AI is here. The question now is, we live in the ServiceNow space. How ServiceNow, if you go to their website, GenAI is the headline. When we were at Knowledge last year, GenAI was talked about a lot. How do we think ServiceNow sits in this space? Like, are there advantages for ServiceNow? Like, what is kind of your opinion right now of what ServiceNow is doing in this space?
I think they are in one of the best positions for this Gen AI wave, especially when you think about enterprise focus. You've got the biggest businesses in the world relying on you already, and you have a very unique data set that you could feed those language models. And again, I'm not saying anything anyone listening doesn't already know, but I think that's going to be a very big deal. And they got out ahead of this too. They started heavily investing in AI and specifically Gen AI well before this moment where it's all blowing up. So I think they had the long-term vision probably before a lot of their competitors did. If their competitors even have that vision now, I'm unsure, but I do know the way they've been able to position themselves through this is really inspiring. And there are so many use cases in the ServiceNow world of problems they solve where Gen AI is perfect. And they now have this, potentially walled garden of language models that I think it's going to extend their lead quite a bit. So from ServiceNow's perspective, I think it's a very, very exciting time. And I think there's a reason it's all they can talk about right now, because it's such a big deal. So I guess going back to the last part of the conversation around where this will be in the history of technological changes, I think from enterprise focus, this is a really, really big deal.
Yeah, I remember coming, I always had things that I loved about ServiceNow, and I always had criticisms, as a developer, trying to develop applications on ServiceNow. I remember coming back from Knowledge last year, kind of having a change of perspective, realizing that, ServiceNow is positioned in a place that no one else in the world is going to be able to position themselves. And when I think about, or when I hear people talking about the changes in AI and generative AI, they talk about, training the models, and then where are you getting the data? So even Reddit had its IPO recently and, disclosed how they're getting paid for their data for people to train on. And the one thing that I realized is who has the most data in the world when it comes to enterprise IT. And that data is kind of isolated to ServiceNow. They're the leader in the space by a magnitude that is probably uncatchable in some cases. So in order to train these models, like they have the data, they're gonna, they partnered with NVIDIA, which they, talked about last year. So they are training I think they call it the Now LLM. I don't know much about it. I just have heard people talk about it. But I think it puts them in a pretty amazing place. And so the thing that we're starting to see now is you have the data. Well, even also think about this, not just data that customers create, but just think of the community. Like if you're trying to solve IT problems, like the ServiceNow community has answers for, like the source of data there is, huge. I wouldn't even know what that is, and all the documentation associated with ServiceNow. So I think they have a leg up there. What we're trying to figure out now, and I think ServiceNow is rolling things out over the last year, is what are the applications? Like at the application layer, what happens? So they rolled out Now Assist, which is kind of their generative AI on the platform. which is interesting. Do you see, or how do you think at the application layer, some of the things that ServiceNow may do or try to do to assist customers? Like, have you seen anything that's been interesting?
I think what's interesting is ServiceNow has really had this push towards building solutions, typically into verticals with partners. So you've got the platform of ServiceNow, you've got industry experts building together to solve problems for customers. So that's where I think this will come in very useful for customers, is that level of needing to fully understand and become experts in leveraging ServiceNow's GenAI capabilities hopefully won't be a big burden for them, because people are going to be coming to them with solutions built with ServiceNow that solve their particular need. They're not going to have to think about where to apply GenAI. It's going to be baked into, I imagine, pretty much any workflow ServiceNow is going to put out in the next 10 years. So I think they're just going to have the benefit, just from the start of all of that. Frankly, I'm still unsure what it will look like for people building on their own or customers building their own solution. I just don't know yet, but I think it's one of those things where they're going to get an immediate lift regardless of what they do on their own.
Yeah, I do agree. I think there's the platform capabilities that are going to empower customers. Mm-hmm. And then there's people building on the platform their own custom things and being able to use the platform. Probably two separate things, but so tied together, because the more powerful that the tools on the platform become, if they're giving access to those for custom applications, the more mm-hmm. things builders will be able to build. One of the, I try to, consume as much as I can around this area, specifically seeing like how other customers on ServiceNow are thinking about it, but also just in the general environment, like how are other technologies using it. And then over the weekend, I watched a couple videos and presentations of different companies, and clearly one of the things that everyone sees a place for, and I think is because of the Chat GPT interface, is for support. So when you have customer support, whether that is internal customers or even outward-facing customers, if you have a large service desk or team trying to solve problems and incidents, being able to, I don't want to say automate away, but be able to empower the AI to help some of those human agents solve those problems. Everyone's talking about that. And one of the really big things that came out in the news, I think it was about a month ago, as Klarna came out. They're newly public company. They're in the financial industry. And they said in the first month they had released, I got the stats up here because I didn't want to get it wrong. They released some AI agents that took over the work of 700 human agents, and they fulfilled 2.3 million conversations in 1 month. And they estimated that saved them $40 million. Now, don't know if that's reality or if that's just like PR stuff getting out there, but that number, I think, caught a lot of people. Now, you look at ServiceNow. ServiceNow is empowering all of those companies that are on ServiceNow to start using Now Assist to do those things. And I think that's really exciting. It could be a place, we do know Now Assist is starting to filter into all these different verticals, like you were saying. And I think it's an interesting place to see.
I think something with that too is, how common is it when you get on a phone and you're met with a robot and have to work through options with them, or you get on a chat and it's clear that it's a robot talking to you. You don't care that you're talking to a robot if it's actually helpful. But to this point, oftentimes it falls short of that. So then you get frustrated, say, I just want to talk to a person. I think it will be a big deal, because this is the type of thing where Gen AI could truly be helpful. So then it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, because a lot of, if you think back even 4 or 5 years ago, maybe even 2 or 3 years ago, a lot of those bots that you're chatting with are predetermined trees of like things. So like if you don't fit neatly into that tree, you kind of are out of luck, where, obviously the LLMs help solve some of those problems. Okay, so I do think that's obviously the clear use case where GenAI, ServiceNow, they're showing their strength, and I think they have a lot of strength there. Let's take this down to our level, and at VividCharts, how do we think about the possibilities of GenAI? What are some of the things that we just are staying aware of as we move along, knowing this is coming, and then, applications we're developing, customers that we're trying to support?
Yeah, and obviously this, but I guess listeners might not. You and I talk about Gen AI every week. Like, we're keeping our finger on the pulse. One thing we are making sure we don't do is chasing AI for a problem that doesn't actually exist for the customers we are serving. So that is one thing that's kind of a commitment from us. We're not going to make any AI, features that we know won't be helpful, or we're not sure will be helpful. But I do think there's some core things that could be very helpful in the world we serve, which is automating operational reporting, which I guess we could talk about in a minute. But I'd love to hear from your perspective where you think it fits in, just at a high level with analytics, operational reporting. Just where are the clear wins for AI right now?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about automated operational reporting, because I think that context is really good. And I do think there's two things here. There's how do we use AI ourselves, generative AI, to become more efficient as a company? So we talk about that, like, how can we empower our engineers? How do we power the product team when they're doing discovery? How do we empower marketing? Like, how can we utilize AI? And then there's also, like, how do we build products that help our customers? Okay, so let's talk about AOR, is our acronym for Automated Operational Reporting. I do think it's really clear, and you've talked about this many times in the past, but to distinguish the difference between that and analytics, because I think without that understanding, the conversation about AI gets a little fuzzy. With that understanding, I feel like it gets pretty clear. So maybe I'll put it back on you if you want to just give us a brief distinction between the two in your mind.
Yeah, so analytics, in my opinion, is very much so trying to make sense of all the data you have. You're going to be interrogating the data, asking it questions. There's a lot to analytics, without a doubt. And in that paradigm, Gen AI is a perfect fit. It's a truly perfect fit, because you're going to be asking questions of your data, and it's going to be able to serve insights up, and it's going to save people a lot of time. With operational reporting, it's a little bit different, because a lot of the things that you're reporting on are standards that your organization may have had for decades, and it will evolve. Certain metrics will become more important. Different thresholds will be more important. Like, these documents evolve over time, but they are the same documents that are steering your organization. You're looking at these usually on a regular cadence, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. It doesn't really matter, but you need the same set of reports that you're measuring yourself against over time to know how you're going. And I think about it as, if you were to just have a magic wand where you could say, hey, Gen AI, do my operational reporting for me. I think that would be like getting in a car and just telling the navigation, go to where I need to go, but you don't actually tell it where you need to go. So then who knows where you'll end up. So at a very high level, that's what I think of when I think about Gen AI's fit strategically between analytics and operational reporting. That doesn't mean there aren't tons of smaller features that I think will be very helpful for operational reporting. Yeah,
I liked the car analogy when you shared it with me in the past. I use sports analogies all the time, so forgive me if you're not a sports fan, but I think of it as like operational reporting is like you're in a game and you have a playbook, right? And you know that you have certain things that you need to accomplish, and that playbook is in front of you, and you work towards that playbook, which is nice because there's no discovery, right? You have the playbook, you've kind of practiced it, you know what you need to do to be successful. Operational reporting, at the end of the week, the month, the quarter, whatever, you're reporting on the items that you have said, you and your team, we need to execute on to be successful. We know these to be somewhat fact. Where the analytics is a little bit of a pool of information, and you're like, let's go discover some new things that may give us another metric. Analytics informs your operational reporting. You may discover new things in your analytics practice that says, okay, next quarter we need to operate against this because we see it's going to give us another play in the playbook that we can execute on to help us win. And I do think that is where Gen AI is going to be very helpful is, processing, analyzing that data in order to give you the playbook that you ultimately have to execute on. Operational reporting also is storytelling. You need to take that information, how you execute it, and put it in a narrative or a story that you're trying to tell others on your team. Here's how we did, here's how we were supposed to do, and here's the outcomes based on those things. Which again, at the moment, Gen AI can support some of those elements of that, but isn't going to generate that whole narrative. There still is a human kind of molding of the story, I guess you could say.
Right.
Let's kind of review some of the things that we did. We reviewed kind of the big picture, kind of where we're thinking. We both talked about how we think ServiceNow is highly positioned in a position of strength regarding Gen AI specifically, especially in the verticals that ServiceNow plays in, which is a lot of verticals today, but they have a position of power that I think no one else in the world has, no other company in the world has. It's going to have a hard time catching up with. And we talked about how AI at our level impacts both operational reporting and then the analytics practice, which feeds into the AOR stuff. Let's go ahead and end the conversation there, and then I'm sure we'll have some changes in the next week, in the next month, and we can come back later and continue the conversation as we learn more.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Gary, for setting this up, and thank you all for listening.
Thanks, Mitch.